Hello and welcome to the 7th video in the PHP e-commerce video series that we're doing. We're building our website Shanta's Boutique, just a hypothetical clothing store, and today we're going to make our product pop-ups or modals dynamic, and so let's get busy on it. So here we are in Atom where we left off in the last video, and we're going to do a few things. Let's go ahead and take a look at our site. So in my browser I'm going to go to localhost/tutorial, which is the name of my deal here, and you can see that we have our dynamic menus set up. They don't do anything yet, we'll fix that later. And right now we have static modals that pop up. See, it's the same modal for each one. And so what I need to do is have a dynamic modal that loads the correct information in this when I click the details button on that product. So the first thing I want to do is we're going to go ahead and break our page. And I know that sounds scary, but right here on our index page, let's just go ahead and open up all the folders we're going to need first. We're going to need our index.php file. We're going to need our details modal.php file. We'll need our init.php file. We'll also need our footer. That's it for now, I think. So what we're going to do here is down here our index, in our index.php, we have our modal included, and we're going to go ahead and delete that for now because we're not going to include it. We're going to actually do something called an Ajax request or an HTTP request to grab that information from that file. So that's going to act more like a parser file rather than an include. So if I hit save now and go back and refresh, if I click my buttons, they don't do anything. And it's because our code isn't there anymore. It's not being included. Okay. So now that we've done that, what we want to do is make this button. This right here is our button that opens our modal. And by default, to open that, the way that Bootstrap sets it up is they have this data toggle modal. And what that does is these are just custom attributes that fire off a JavaScript function that open their modal. So we're going to get rid of that, and what we actually want to do is we're going to do an on-click attribute here, and what that's going to do is allow us to fire off our own JavaScript function. So I'm going to call that details modal and make it a function here. So details modal, that's a function, it's going to be a JavaScript function. So let's go ahead and just create that function real quick. And the best place to create that is in our footer here. Down here we already have these script tags open from this is our JavaScript function here that detects our window scroll and makes our parallax effect work. Well, inside of here, underneath that, we're going to go ahead and create our function. And to create a JavaScript function, we're going to type function, and then our function name, which was details modal, and then we need the parentheses, and then open and close our curly braces. Okay, and that's it. That's our framework here for our modal. Now we can actually make this real short and sweet, and we could for now we can just do alert and put yay, it worked. Okay, and I'll save that. So now what should happen when I refresh the page is when I click this, it should pop up an alert that says yay, it worked. And there it is. There's our JavaScript alert. So if that happens, we know that our JavaScript function is actually working. But we obviously don't want that to happen. We want to go ahead and open our modal. So to make that happen, let's go ahead and go back here to our index page, and we need to pass it a parameter, and what we want to pass it is an ID of the product. Now let's go ahead and look at our database real quick. So localhost/php myadmin, and if we look in our database and we go to products, we notice that we have an ID for each product. And so what we want to do is tell it that we want to pass it this product ID, because then we can get the rest of this information based upon that ID. Okay, so the problem is we don't know what the ID is going to be for each one, but we've already done the hard work, because in the last video we set up this this query statement here, and we select all from products where featured equals 1. And what we have here is we have looped through with a while loop, and we've assigned this associative array to product. So now we have this array called product, and we can actually echo that ID with this. So we don't have to write really much more PHP to make that ID pass in here. So what we're going to do now is we're going to open our PHP tags, and we'll do our shortcut for echo. So it's just opening PHP tag with an equal sign, and then we're going to make use of our product loop here, or our product array, and it's associative array, so we need square brackets, and then we're going to use our single quotes, and inside of that we're going to put ID. That ID here is being pulled from the field in our database, that ID field. So then right outside of this, I'll go ahead and close my PHP tags, and so now I'm calling this JavaScript function, I'm looping through each product, and I'm creating on that button this JavaScript function, and I'm passing inside of that. When it loops through the first product, that ID will be 1, so this will echo out 1. On the next pass, this will echo out 2, and then so on and so on for the page. And when I click that, it's going to tell me or pass into that JavaScript function that ID, and that's exactly what we want. So I'm going to go ahead and save that, and right here in our footer now, we're going to go ahead and put ID right there. So whatever's passed into here will be assigned to this, and so now we have access to this within our variable. So what we can do now is, instead of alerting yay it worked, we can actually just alert ID there. Okay, so let's alert ID, save that, go back to our page and refresh, and now instead of getting yay it worked, we'll get an alert with the ID inside of it. So let's see what happens. Okay, so we got 1. Let's look at our database and just see if that's right. So we clicked on the pants, so ID of 1, yeah, that's for our Levi jeans, so that works. So let's try this one. If this one should be 2 if everything worked correctly. Yep, 2. So now we know that we have our JavaScript function, and it's passing in our product ID, and that's great news, because now we can actually do something called an Ajax request, or an HTTP request, to our modal page and send it that ID and pass back all the code we need to open our modal. So let's get going on that. Now, we actually don't want to alert this. What we want to do is we want to create a variable, and we're just going to call it data here, and data is going to equal a JSON string. Okay, and so a JSON string here, so all we're going to have to do now is I'm going to tell it I want ID, okay, and I want that to be equal to ID. Now that's kind of confusing, but what I'm doing is I'm setting basically an object up here. This data is going to be an object, okay, and I'm giving it ID here, and I'm setting that equal to what's passed here. This variable ID is going to get passed right down here because it's available to us in this, because we passed it into this function. Okay, so that's all we're going to need right here for this data. So we got that set up. We can clean this code up a little bit. Okay, the next thing we're going to want to do inside of our function here, and if you notice we are working inside of this detail modal function, is now we have access to jQuery's, and we can do this with vanilla JavaScript as well, but it's a little bit easier, and I think I'm going to show you just in this video, since we're already using jQuery, we're just going to go ahead and use their Ajax function. So go ahead and open that up. So it's just jQuery.ajax, okay, and then inside of here we're going to pass it an object. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and give myself some room here just to clean this up a little bit. and it's expecting a few things. The first thing it's expecting is a URL. Okay, the URL is going to be the URL to this details modal page right here. Okay, so that URL, we've got to tell it where that file lives. And so before we get too crazy, let's just go ahead and I'm just going to, for now, I'm going to put in URL, and we're going to change that later. But the way we set this up is it's a comma, so we're setting this equal to we're passing it this, and we're setting this equal to it. Okay, and we do that with a colon here because it's an object, and it's a JSON object. Okay, that's the syntax for it. I'm going to go down to the next line now, and the next thing is it's expecting is a method. Now by default, if you don't put anything here, this is going to be get, but we need to post. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and put post here, and what that's going to do is it's just like posting. It's going to post whatever we send it. It's going to post it like just like it's a form posting posting information to a form. And that's a horrible description. I'm very sorry. I'm a little under the weather and I'm very tired. So anyhow, we'll get through this. So we got this method here, and we're going to set that to post. Okay. The next thing it needs is the data, because we are going to use the method as post, and we're just going to give it this data right here. Okay. We already set that up. So that's what's going to be post to our page that the URL goes to. Alright, the next thing we need is success. So what's going to happen on success? Okay, and that is actually going to be a function. So we're just going to do an anonymous function here. Alright, and we're not going to put anything in there for now because I just want you to see the format of this. The next thing we're going to do is an error. So what happens if this fails? Okay, we're also going to pass that an anonymous function. And that's it. This right here is our Ajax call. Now Ajax is just an acronym, and it just means asynchronous JavaScript and XML. Okay, and what it is we don't really use XML anymore, but we use JSON as kind of the more modern way to do it and just a little more efficient. You still absolutely could use an XML file, or an XML data can be sent, but we're going to send a JSON file, and they just haven't changed this X to a J. One, because Ajax just doesn't sound as cool as Ajax, and everybody knows it as Ajax, so that's how we're going to do it. But the A is for asynchronous, and what that means is this can happen while other processes are happening. So the page does not need to reload for this to happen, and that's the magic of this, is we're not going to have to reload the page. So JavaScript, that's the language we're using. So we're going to mix JSON and this, and we're gonna send this JSON object of data to our file, and we're going to get back some information. All right. So let's go finish setting up our URL. So let's go over to our init.php file, and right here we're gonna go ahead and make a constant. So to do that, we're going to use our define, or this is back in PHP, by the way. So we're going to use define, and right here in define, we're going to, in all caps, we're going to do base URL, and that's just what we're calling it. And then the next parameter it needs is the actual path. Now, in the real world, our base URL would probably look something like a magic constant, okay? And that would look kind of like this, okay? And that would take wherever this file is at and set that to this base URL. Now, we can't really do that it doesn't really work with localhost. So what we're going to do, we're just going to put our / for the root, and then the name of our base folder. So mine's tutorial, and we'll go ahead and put a trailing slash on that, and we're going to put all this in quotes, our single quotes here. Alright, so what's happening is we're defining a constant. Now a constant in PHP is all uppercase by convention, okay, and we're going to have access to that later in just a moment, and we're setting this to tutorial. Okay, and so we're going to save this out, and since we have included this init.php in our file here at the top, we have access to this constant base URL. So what I need to do here is in this URL I need to replace this, and what I'm going to replace it with is a PHP echo. Alright, and we're going to echo out base URL. Okay, and so it's going to echo that, and then we're going to concatenate on the rest of the path, which is includes / details modal.php. This is our path now to here. Okay, so we're going to send this data to that file. Alright, so that, and the data that we're sending was set up right here, and we're getting this ID that was passed in here, and we got that because we set that in our button here. Alright, so we passed that to the details modal function. This is our function, details modal function, and it had one parameter, so we named it ID, and now we have access in our function to that. Alright, so on failure, we're not going to need anything there, but let's just, if it fails, let's just say alert, and we're going to say something went wrong. Okay, you would probably want to handle that a little differently, but okay. And then this success, what we're going to have back from our other file is our data here. So we're going to pass that data from our success into our function. Alright, so then inside of our success function, what we're going to do is essentially add all the information we get back from the detail modal, which will be our entire modal code. Okay, we're going to append that to the bottom of our body. We're going to use jQuery to do that. So what we could do is jQuery and then body. So we're selecting the body. Alright, dot. So we're using the body object here, the jQuery object of body, and we're going to append, which means add to, and what we're going to append to it is data. So what comes back from the success here is this data, and we're going to append it to our body. Okay? So what does that mean? Well, that means we're just going to take all of this and we're going to put it right before our closing body tag in our index file, or whatever file we have open here in our body. So let's just pretend what's going to happen. You see this / body. It's going to append that information, near this body here. Okay. So that's what this is going to do. The next thing we need to do is the last thing. We actually just need to open our modal. So we're going to select the modal, and let's see what we called that. Let's go ahead and look at here in our modal. The ID was details1, and actually what I'm going to do is change that. So in the ID, let's just go ahead and change that to details-modal. All right. I'm going to save that. So we need to target that. So that was an ID. So we're going to use the hash sign here, and that was details-modal. So what it's going to do is it's going to take this. It's going to take the ID of that modal, okay, of this div. Now, and so what we're going to do is once that's selected, we have access to this modal method that Bootstrap JS has provided us with, and we're going to pass it in an option of toggle. So this right here is going to select our details modal, the ID of that, and it's going to toggle that modal. So that's basically going to open the modal. So first we're going to add our HTML that we get back from this details page here that we sent with our Ajax request. It's going to add it to the page. Once it's added, then it's going to open, the next line of code is going to open that modal. Okay? This is going to be passed back to our Ajax request. Okay? In order to do that, since we have so much here, we could echo, but we don't want to echo all of this. I mean, that's not efficient at all. So what we're going to do is we're going to use this object buffer start. Okay? And this is a PHP function. Alright, so that's that. And then at the very end, we're going to open our PHP tags again. Sorry, I forgot the PHP. That would have worked, but that's just bad practice just to leave it like that. So anyhow, down at the bottom of our file now, what we want to do is get clean. Okay? Close our PHP tags. So this is going to start a buffer. Okay, and then when it gets here, it's going to start a buffer and it's going to read all of this, and then it's going to add that to the buffer, which is going to send this back to our Ajax request as the data object. Alright, and then when it gets here, it's going to free up that memory with this function here, this get clean, and that's just going to clean that buffer out. It's going to clear the memory. Alright, so I think that should work. Let's go ahead and see what happens now. Refresh. Okay, let's go back here and look at our details modal here. Echo. There we are. So I needed that echo there. So we weren't actually getting anything returned. So if I echo that now, this is working, but we're back to where we were. This isn't really dynamic because it's opening the same things. Now, what's interesting though is if I go ahead and inspect the element here, and we go to network. Let's go ahead and go to network, and let me hit details. If we see here now in the network, we have actually passed this. This details modal shows up. So what happens is we got a status code of 200, which means it found the file. So that means our URL is correct. Okay. Now, the other thing to look at is this form data, because we used post. So now we have this form data, and you can see ID was passed and 1 was passed there. So when I look back here, we can see what was returned was all of this information. Now this is what was inside of our header that that we passed through with our buffer. Okay, and a lot of times you would just echo one piece back or something like that, or you would send back. A lot of times you would send back a JSON object, but we wanted to send back like a lot of HTML code. That's the reason I did it that way. It's not super common, but that's what I did. Okay, so let's just look now and see if we hit the other one, if this form data is being passed to with ID of 2. Okay, so close this. So now if I inspect the element and network, and go back here, try that one more time, and now in our network, if I click that, I can see that indeed the form data is being passed to that as 2. Okay, so now we just have to do a little bit of PHP magic to pass back the correct information here. Okay, so that's going to be really easy. We've already done the hard part, and this is not going to be much different than anything else we've already done. So at the top of the page here on the details modal, what I want to do at the very top is open my PHP, go down a couple lines, close my PHP tag. And because we used post and we have that form data sent to this, we actually have access to post array. Okay, so to get this, it's just $_post, all caps. All right, and what was sent to us in that array was ID. Okay, so we have access to that now. So what we can do is, let's set that a variable to that. Okay, so we're just going to say ID equals post ID. Okay, so we have access to this, so now this is that. Okay, now the other thing we might want to do, just for security purposes, is we're going to cast this to an integer. Just make sure it's an integer. So we're just going to do that, and that's just going to make sure that this is an int, and it's not some weird string that someone passed us through the post data. So that's going to, and we always want an integer because our IDs are always integers. Okay, so now ID is going to be equal to whatever they sent here, which will be, in our case, 2 on the last one, or 1, all right, or whatever product ID we happen to get. So then we can set up our SQL variable. I like to use double quotes on mine, and I close everything out as I go. So in our double quotes, this is our, we want select all from products, okay, where ID is equal to, and then in our single quotes here we can say ID. And what's going to happen is it's going to pass this ID here. So it's going to do it. This is our statement. It's going to be select all from products where ID is equal to 1 or 2 or whatever the product ID happens to be that's passed to us from our Ajax call. Okay. So now we just need to actually execute the query. So to do that, we are going to make use of our database object. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to call that result is equal to db, and then we have a method in there called query. Okay, and what we're going to pass that is our SQL statement. Okay, so result is equal to, and then we're going to run this executes the query. Then the last thing we got to do, in our last video we did this in a while loop, but we're only expecting 1 back because there's only one product that has this ID. So what we can do is just go ahead and set up now product is equal to MySQL SQLi underscore fetch underscore assoc, and what we're going to pass that is a result. Okay, so this is a pre-made function within PHP. They were good enough to give that to us, and it's going to take the result of our query and turn that into an associative array, and it's setting that to product. So now we have an associative array called product. Okay, and this actually isn't going to work yet. We have to do one more thing before we start replacing this to make it dynamic. So what we need to do is, because this page isn't included, it's being called, we actually are going to have to include, or how about this, we do require once, and then we're going to have to back up a folder here. So require once core init.php. Alright, so now we'll have access to this this database object here, because it's actually our database connection here within our core init with our init.php file. Alright, so that's it for our PHP. That's going to include our init, so we have access to our database. We're getting our ID here. We're doing a little security on the ID to make sure it's actually an integer. Okay, and then we're creating our statement, our SQL statement here. Okay, and we're passing it this ID, and then we're setting up result, and we're actually running the query with our database object here. So database, our DB query is coming from this init.php, and there's a built-in method for that called query, and we're passing it in our statement here. We could have easily typed that statement inside of there, but this is a little cleaner. And then we're setting up our associative array. So now we have this associative array called product. So what I can do is, let's just go and start replacing things. So how about right here where it says Levi's jeans, we get rid of this, okay, and we're going to echo, or open our PHP tags and echo product, and then title, and then close our PHP tags. So this is going to echo product title, and let's just look at our database, refresh our memory. So title, so it's going to either give us Levi jeans or beautiful shirt back. Okay, so we have ID, title, price. We have each one of these returned to us in our array. So now we've replaced title there. The next thing is our image. So inside of our source right here, we can get rid of that static source and open our PHP tags and echo. This time we're going to do product, and we're going to say image, and close our PHP tags. And then I'm going to copy this right here because I want this title to actually be in our alt tag of our image as well. So I'm going to replace Levi's jeans there. So you see what we're doing so far? So far this is starting to get dynamic. Right here in this paragraph tag, this is going to be our description. So we need to echo, echo product description. All right. For price, I'm going to just only get rid of that $34.99 there. Open our PHP tags, echo, and that's going to be product price. So you see the how easy this is becoming. Alright, so actually let's go ahead and take care of brand. So what we're going to need to do is actually make another database call or another query statement. Alright, and the reason we're going to have to do that is because brand, if you look here, is actually an integer that's actually tied to our brand table. So if I open brand table, we just have ID and brand in there. And what I need it to say is this brand right here, but it's being called by this ID. And that'll make more sense later when we get to actually adding these brands in here. So what I'm going to do is, back in our code, we're going to set up another SQL statement, and this time it's going to be equal to, I like to close my lines. Okay, so now what we want to do is select, and we can just say select brand from, and then our table was called brand, just plural. Select brand. So this is actually a little confusing, but select brand, this is selecting the actual column labeled brand, or the field brand, from the table brand, and then we're going to pass it a condition where ID is equal to, and here what we're going to do is we're going to, in single quotes, actually what I need to do is right above this SQL, we're going to make one more variable, and we're going to call this brand in lowercase, brand underscore ID is equal to product brand. Okay, so what that's going to do is give us a variable, and it's going to pass that integer from the database into this. So now I have access to that brand ID here, just like that. That's what we want, because, and if you don't get it, just take a minute and pause the video and read over this code, because we're going to set this variable here, and we're getting the brand from the product, the brand integer from the product table, and we're setting it to this brand ID, and then we're creating an SQL here, and we're saying select brand from brand where ID equals brand ID. Okay, that's it. So now we're going to run that query. So db query, pass it SQL. And we could have called this SQL2 if we didn't want to overwrite this, but we actually don't need this statement again, so we can just reassign it here. Alright, and then let's go ahead and set that to a variable. We'll say just keep this brand query. Horrible with naming. So here's what we're going to do. First of all, I noticed that I forgot a semicolon here. That's going to be a syntax error. And then right here we're going to set brand equal to, so it's going to be MySQL underscore fetch assoc. Now we're not going to do, well, we're going to pass that in now, brand query, right? Get our semicolon. So now we have brand, and we can use that down here where this says Levi's. We're just going to delete that, open our PHP tags, and echo out. Now we have brand, and it's an array. And remember that field was called brand. Okay. So let's just test this now. Let's go back and look at what we got. If I refresh. All right. So now we got our title coming through dynamically. Our image is still working, so that's good. If that's not working, check your URL in your database. Details, we have our description being pulled in right here. We have our price right there, that's being pulled in, and we have our brand. We just need to, first I'm going to get rid of this available 3, we're not going to use that, but we need to make this dynamic now. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's look at our code here. And I'm just going to get rid of this available 3 here. We don't need that. Alright. But what we want to do is, instead of having these static values here in our drop down, we want to put our sizes. Okay. So in order to do this, I'm going to do something called size string. Okay. Now size string is going to be equal to product sizes. Okay, and where that's coming from is in our database we have, in our products we have sizes right here. Remember our syntax we talked about before? We're going to separate each one by a comma, and we're going to have our quantity mixed in with that string. So that string is going to be equal to all of that. So let's just so we can see what's going on there, let's at the top of this right here, let's just go ahead and echo our size string. Okay. And now if I refresh and I click details, nothing shows up. Product. Oh, well, I need to put this inside of our modal, actually. And let's just go ahead and put that right underneath our H4 here. And we'll get rid of that, but I just want to see here. So you can see it right here. There we are. So we got small :3, medium :6, large :9. That's just how I've chosen to do this. Okay. So what we want to do is, that's the correct string there from our database. Alright, so we'll get rid of that. We don't need it. But what we want to do is we want to separate this out. So let's just make a new variable, and let's call this size. Call this size array. Okay. And what we're going to do is we're going to use a PHP function called explode. Alright, now explode is going to take that string, and the first thing we're going to give this this function is our delimiter, and we're going to put that inside of single quotes, and it's going to be comma. Alright, so then it gets another parameter, and that is what we're going to explode. So it's sizes string. So what this is going to do is going to make a new array, and what it's going to do is make an array from this string, and it's going to split that array up every time it sees a comma. It's going to make a new array. So now let's just see what that looks like. If I var dump size array, save that, and I better wrap that in PHP if I want that to work. Alright, PHP tags there, refresh, open that up, and now you see we have an array with nothing in it. So what happened? Must be a typo there. So let's go back and look. Right, so it's just size string, not sizes string. Now if I refresh and open that up, we get an array, okay? And it's got 3 elements, 0, 1, and 2. Remember, the index of arrays start with 0 instead of 1. So it's 0, 1, 2, so we have 3 elements in this array. Alright? So we can see the first element in an array is small : 3. The next one is medium : 6. The next one is large : 9. So what we can do now, and I know this is getting a little complex, but just bear with me. What we can do now is loop through that size array. So down here, we want to get rid of, right here after this option, what we want to do is we're going to make a PHP, and let's just say PHP while, and I'm going to go ahead and give that a colon and close my PHP tags, and then after this option here, open PHP back up, and I'm going to say end while semicolon, close my PHP tags. Alright, so I can actually get rid of these two. I won't need those. We're just going to echo this out for each one. And what we want to do is in here we're going to pass sizes array. So while, alright, actually you have to excuse me, I'm going to do a for each instead of, so I'm going to say for each loop, and we're actually going to do this the traditional way here with opening and closing brackets. Alright, it's like this. So what do I want to do? Well, for each one of these I'm going to echo something. So I'm going to echo this. Okay. So what we're going to do is for each size, what was that? Size underscore array. For each size as, it's actually going to be another string, because what we want to do is create another array. Okay, so we're just going to call that string. So here what we're going to do is we're going to use we're going to explode this one more time, and we're going to say string, I don't know, this is really getting bad with naming, so string array is equal to, we're going to use our explode function again, and we're going to this time our delimiter is going to be the colon, okay? And we're going to pass that string. Alright, and so now we're going to set our two variables. We're going to say size equals, but now we have this string array, and it's 0 is the size for that index, okay? And then we also have quantity, and we're going to make that equal to string array 1 this time. Alright, so you see what's happening here. We're creating this array here from this string. And remember what that string looked like was, it was the size, so it was small, colon, and then we had our quantity. So that's kind of what that looked like. So we exploded that with the colon, so it's going to split these two up and make small an index in the array, and it's going to make this here, the number 6, an index in the array. So that's what that's doing. So now what we can do is our value for our selecting our size is going to simply be, we're going to bust out of our echo statement there, and we're going to concatenate on our size. And we're going to do the same exact thing right here. We're going to do single quotes to break out of the echo statement, and we're going to concatenate on size. Now, what I'd like to do is inside this option is I want it to also in parentheses say how many is available. So let me spell that right. Available. So I want it to say how many is available here. So once again, break out of PHP and concatenate on there. And this time we're going to do quantity. Alright. Now this is a mess right here, and that's the reason why a lot of times, you know, we break out of PHP and we don't echo all that out. But I'm just going to leave it like this. It's a different way of writing it. If you're doing a lot of HTML, maybe you not want to do this, but basically we're echoing from here to here, and then we're going to concatenate on our size, and then we're going to we're concatenating on this string right here, okay? Then we're going to concatenate on our size again, and then this string here, and then breaking out, concatenating on our quantity, and then this is the rest of the string, okay? So what that's going to give us now, if I refresh and open this up, in our drop down we have our size, and then it tells us in parentheses how many is available. 3 available, 6 available, 9 available. Okay, we still have our var dump up here, so we can get rid of that. Let's go back here now, and let's get rid of our var dump so we can clean that up. We don't need that anymore. So that's all working. We're all dynamic there inside of there. So we're almost done. The only thing we have left to figure out is closing this stupid modal and deleting the code that's in our body that we appended to it. So right here, after our last div here, we're going to go ahead and open some script tags. Some Java. We're going to do a little bit of JavaScript here. Okay. And we're going to create a function. We're going to call that close modal. Alright. Now, close modal, right here in this button, this data dismiss, we're going to go ahead and get rid of this data dismiss right here. And we're going to do an on click, just like before. And we're going to say equals, and oops, we're going to go ahead and do the close modal function. the other place that we need to do that is in our close button down here. We have one more button that can close it. So this up here is the X that you click on at the top of the modal. Here we want to fire off a JavaScript function there. We also want to fire off the same JavaScript function if they click here. So either one of those will close it. Okay? So to make that happen, we're going to get rid of this data dismiss modal here, which was set up by default from our Bootstrap file. And we're just going to do an on-click event. And that was close modal function there. So then we just need to write our close modal function. Alright, so in order to do that, we're going to make use of jQuery again, and we're going to select, remember we called that our details modal, I think. Let's go ahead and look at that real quick. Details dash modal. So details dash modal. We have a function given to us by the Bootstrap JS. It's called modal, and we'll pass it an option of close. So that's going to fire off and it's going to close our modal. Alright? Now, there's one last problem with that, one little bit we got to figure out, because if we look at this and refresh it, this will not work. This isn't supposed to be closed. This option is actually hide. Alright, so let's go and refresh that and just double check that works. Alright. So we also need to get rid of the HTML that's at the end, so that when we click on these, it opens the right modal up. Okay, because now we have two of them with the same ID. So we want to wait about a half a second, and then we want to actually remove that. So we got a set timeout function. We have a set timeout function here available to us, and this is just straight JavaScript here, and it gets two parameters. The second parameter is going to be the time in milliseconds that it waits. So this set timeout is just gonna fire this off, and before it fires the next line off, it's gonna wait. And this, in our case, we want to wait about a half second. Now you can experiment with that. That's just what I found out. So the first parameter is, what are we waiting to do? Well, I'm just going to create a function in here, an anonymous function. Alright, and I want it to do a couple things. One thing I want it to do is that code that was generated from our Ajax call, okay? So we're going to just target our details modal, and we're going to do a remove. That is, this right here is totally, this dot remove is a jQuery function that will remove whatever this is. So this object here is created from jQuery. We've targeted all that information. So let's just go ahead and see what happens now. If I close that, you can see now that I'm able to close that and open up the other. So that's working. And the reason that's working is because now the code that generates this at the bottom of the page does not exist, because that jQuery function is removing it. I did have an issue once before with the background hanging on from the modal. So that was a class of modal backdrop. So just to make sure that that's not there anymore, let's just go ahead and do jQuery, give it a class of modal backdrop, and remove that as well. That probably won't be an issue for you, but what that will do is this little overlay, the dark overlay you see in the back, that is going to be removed as well, just to make sure that we can access everything. So now we have our complete dynamic modals here, and it's actually grabbing information from our database and opening up. So let's just test our close function here. Alright, so that was rough for a video, but we got through it, and in the next video I think what we're going to do is start building our back end for the site so that we can add our brands and our categories and our products from the back end interface, so we don't have to go into our database and add those manually. Alright, so I will see you in the next video.